very distinguished college. The principal, Professor Fakir Mohan Senapati, in absentia, Professor Raj Kumar, esteemed Professor Raj Kumar and Professor Veeta Mathur, Professor Tasneem Senas, and Dr. Hemchandra, Dr. Shivan Verma, and Dr. Mosumi, and all the staff, new faculty members who joined a couple of months ago, and the students, the researchers, and of course my research scholars, Dr. Sagar and Dr. Bhaskar. A very good morning to all of you. Today we are going to talk about the hermeneutics of translation. It's a very important topic. Already they have introduced so much about me. But then one thing I would like to put it on record here, that I have deep engagement with translation studies vis-a-vis Indian folk literature and the interpretation of Indian culture when I designed some important academic programs for my university on folklore and culture studies. If you look at the National Education Policy document, you find that it gives a lot of importance to languages. The document uses the word language more than 200 times, right? And the Government of India gives a lot of importance to the Bhasha literatures and different languages of the country, like it talks about family languages, and then it talks about state languages, and also about the 22 languages of India approved by the Parliament, and also a lot of oral languages which are slowly being documented by folklorists. Here Dr. Hemchandra, he is working on folk literature, is telling me this morning that you are my representative here, you are a folklorist, so it's your duty to document languages and do a lot of work on folklore. And my heart fills with joy to see all of you here, people who I interviewed already, the principal has told, and then you were selected most objectively with a lot of rigorous process, and then I'm sure that I was not so good with you in the interviews. Probably I was asking too many questions, and I was trying to engage each one of you, trying to get the best out of you, but the end product is something that I feel proud of. I see people sitting here and doing good work. The moment I came, everyone came to me, I did, then Shivam, then Chandra, all of you, then Pooja, and they were asking me, ma'am, how are you, then talking about their research and their publications, and I'm so glad to see you all. Well, having said that, let's get back to the topic. That in the National Education Policy document, you have many issues there, like you have to be a connoisseur of Indian literatures, Indian Bhasha literatures, translate between the languages and bring the most important Indian writings and in different bhashas, different languages to the forefront, to bring them to your research, your pedagogy, your service. Many of the research scholars who work under my supervision, I always tell them that you should not read only the text that you are working on. You have to read other related texts as well. Somebody worked on, from Northeast India, a student came to me to work on the writings of Northeast India vis-a-vis folk literature. And the texts are not translated, the texts are in Assamese. Then I asked him to come to me after 6 months. I gave him 6 months time to translate those texts from Assamese to English. And then I got them published. I am also associated with a couple of publishing houses, so I got them published in English so that the student had multiple contributions. First, his major contribution was to translation studies, and then later on, through his own translated texts published in English from Delhi, then his contribution was to folk literature. So the folkloristic in Northeast literature, in the literature from the Northeast. So this is first you have to also think what is your social. Yes, apart from your own research, you have to also think about the nation. What is your contribution to Indian academia, rather than only your research? And your contribution can be through translation and through engagement with many languages of the country. So that is how many students sitting here, I would recommend, I would suggest that take important texts from your region, your own languages, try to translate them or transliterate or transcreate and then bring them to research. This would be your contribution. And today's topic, the hermeneutics of translation. If you ask me simplistically what is, do something about it. You will use only one. Fine. If you ask me what is hermeneutics, simplistically I would say hermeneutics is interpretation. And it has a very complex and multi-layered meaning. The connotations are many if you will talk about hermeneutics. So this will be our research point today. And before that, because you have called me to basically talk about Fakir Mohan Senapati, I got one of his books, Riveting, translated in many languages, and I would be focusing only on the Odia original text because I am from Odisha, so I have read the text in Odia and also have some research on that. I have used the text in our BA Odia course in IGNO, Riveting. I have used the text. I will be talking about the layers of the text. And also I will talk about a couple of other texts by Fakir Mohan Senapati. Fakir Mohan Senapati, 1843, he was born, and all of you must be knowing his biographical details are very much there in the websites, and I don't need to talk about all of that. He is called Vyasakavi of Odisha, Vyasdev who wrote Mahabharata. Fakir Mohan Senapati is referred to as Vyasakavi because he translated the Mahabharata from Sanskrit to Odia, and later on his Odia translation has been translated to English and many other languages. And also Sarala Das, he has translated Mahabharata from Sanskrit to Odia, and people do comparative study of the translation of Sarala Das and the translation of Fakir Mohan Senapati. And in the translation of Sarala Das, there is a bit of Sanskritization. You find the language of the elite to some extent, and in the translation of Fakir Mohan Senapati, that is the language of the common people. He talks about the Mahabharata from his own point of view, own perspective. He hasn't taken the complete text of Mahabharata from beginning to end. There is no beginning, middle and end, like Aristotle would have told. He has taken chunks of life. He has taken incidents of the Mahabharata, some incidents, some happenings, some characters of the Mahabharata, and then he has translated Mahabharata in the form of stories, short stories. And Fakir Mohan Senapati had the expertise in short stories. Probably in the Indian literature, he was the first ever short story writer whose story Riveting, the most important story that is already in the syllabus of many universities, including Delhi University and IGNO. This is the first ever short story, which is so multi-layered. You have gender discourses here. You talk about a character, Riveting, who is a 12 years girl. From 10 years it starts and she dies at 12. Those 2 to 3 years period of her life, again it's a slice of her life that is discussed in the story. So you have gender discourses here. And then the kind of language Riveting's grandmother uses. She calls Riveting Chuli, which means, here, Chula. In Hindi it's Chula. So she is so annoyed with Riveting for getting into education. So this is the first ever story in Indian literature where the issue of the girl child and the education of the girl child is so explicitly discussed. No other writer had probably the audacity to write a story so openly and so candidly about the issue of a girl child who wanted to take education, wanted to get education during a period when women's education was not even a dream in the country. Forget about the reality, that was not even a dream in the country. And at that time, Fakir Mohan Senapati thought about bringing that to the table, talking about the education of a girl child so clearly through one of his stories. And then the language part. I will come to that when we talk about the hermeneutics, the politics of translation, the cultural gaps, the linguistic gaps of the translation from original Odia text Riveting to the English and to the Hindi and many other languages. It has been translated. And today, I think the story Riveting is in the syllabus of universities, nothing less than 50 all over the world. Not just the country, all over the world. Many countries have taken Riveting as a part of their syllabus. They talk about India during 1840, 50, 60, that period, what happened to the education of girl children. Not many writers were talking about the education of girl children and also bringing in epidemic. That was a pandemic, that was an epidemic at that time. And half of the family members, almost all the family members, they die because of the epidemic, and Revati is blamed for that. So again, the social taboos, the social issues he brings in. And in the story, rural ecological interpretations are there. So if you take it to green cultural studies as a theoretical debate, in the green cultural studies, or in ocean humanities, green cultural studies, we hear a lot about the discussion on our ecology, our environment, and what is our connection with that, not just as human beings, but also as beings in the planet, along with the animals and all other, And then he talks about caste issues. In this story, in the same story, Revati, the issue of caste also comes up. When Vasu, the teacher, there is a discussion at home that if Vasu should be in a position to marry Revati, there is not any open discourse about that, but the parents are whispering, shall we talk? What is the caste? So, the caste issues also come up. And then education, I already told, girl, child, and gender discourses. We talk about sisterhood, we talk about female bonding, but in the story, the grandmother, Danima, she is not willing to give education to Revati, so she belongs to a generation where girls' education is an impossibility. But also there is one generation between Revati and grandmother, the mother of Revati. She is a character who hardly speaks, but her presence is so clearly felt here. She supports her daughter, Revati, to get education from Vasu. Think about the progressive and the free-thinking mother who doesn't shy away from inviting a young graduate, a young teacher to her house to educate her own girl child who is 12 years old. So three generations, grandmother, mother and Revati. So 3 generations of women, the sisterhood and the solidarity between them. That is also another discourse in the entire story. And then we talk about third world feminism. In the third world feminism scenario, female bonding and female patriarchy are 2 issues of dichotomy. In one side, there is female bonding. The mother wants Revati to get education. And then there is female patriarchy, if you allow me to use this word. Of course, I never like to use this word, but then let me use it here. Female patriarchy, she doesn't want Revati to get education. And the kind of language she uses for Revati when she gets education, that is also one issue here. And a very beautiful parallel story is going on along with the social issues. A very beautiful love story is going on. Revati never speaks to Vasudev beyond her education. Vasudev comes every evening to teach her, to talk to her about Manavadha Chotisa and all those important Odia literary texts. And Revati just waits in front of the house, in the front door. She would be looking at the horizon and waiting for Vasudev to come. The moment Vasu comes, she would run away. She would go inside the house and hide somewhere. And then unless and until she's called to sit in the living room and then talk to Vasu, she would never talk to him. But at the end of the story, there is an eye contact between Vasu and Revati just before Vasu goes to another village to treat the patients of the epidemic. And this love story is so clearly mentioned in the Odia text. Now, coming to your today's topic, hermeneutics of translation. When I told you that by the word hermeneutics we mean interpretation, and then there are a lot of layers to that, the politics of translation, the cultural gap, the linguistic gap, and so many other debates are there. I find those gaps between the Odia text and the English texts. And the English, many people have translated. I have particularly taken the one which is in your syllabus, the translated one in your syllabus. I have taken that and translated by Lilavati Mahapatra, then Paul Saint-Pierre and K.K. Mohapatra. I have taken that one to consideration. So today I will be talking about the interpretation and the translation and the cultural gaps and also the linguistic gaps. I have taken a lot of points. I don't know if I have time, and also I don't know, by the end of my lecture I may break into tears because this story is so close to my heart. I have been reading it forever and I have been teaching it. I have written multiple research papers on that. You'll find on the internet. So now let's get back to Fakir Mohan Senapati. As I already told you, he died in the year 1918, and he is compared to Thomas Hardy of Odisha. The range, the wide spectrum, the range, the topics, the characters, the creation of the characters by Fakir Mohan Senapati. So Mayadhar Mansingh, the great Odia writer, he compares Fakir Mohan Senapati to the Thomas Hardy of Odisha. And even in Indian literature, many people have written research papers and documents on Fakir Mohan Senapati compared to Rabindranath Tagore, and also some very important Hindi writers like Premchand. He has been compared to Fakir Mohan Senapati. I saw a couple of research papers on Shodh Ganga where Fakir Mohan Senapati and many Hindi writers have been compared. And the text Godan by Premchand has been compared to Fakir Mohan Senapati's Chomana Atagunta. Chomana Atagunta, that is one very important novel. So students, when you read Revati, I would suggest, if you don't want to read all the texts of Fakir Mohan Senapati, at least read Chomana Atagunta. You will know about a society. Not only Odia society during that period, there is no Swatantra Odisha Pradesh. Odisha was distributed among Bihar, Bengal and nearby states. And later on, Odisha became a separate state in 1936, and it got the statehood. And also recently, 5-6 years ago, Odia language became one of the classical languages of the country. There are only 6 classical languages in India, out of which Odia is one language. And Fakir Mohan Senapati's contribution to making Odia a classical language is immense. It's not incomparable, unparalleled, because the kind of texts he wrote more than 40-50 books, and out of which Chomana Atagunta is very important. And one is Mamu is uncle, Mamaji, and it has been also translated to many languages. And he has been also compared to, well, let's not go to Shakespeare, I will not go to drama, let's stick to only novels. And then his another book by Fakir Mohan Senapati is Dakko Munshi, and Dakko Munshi is also a very emotional story. Somebody comes to a village every day to sell bangles, a bangle seller. He comes to a village to give bangles to a newly wed wife, a beautiful woman, and then she is very keen to buy an expensive set of bangles, and then she doesn't have the money for that. And then he goes away, not Dakko Munshi, this is another story. Dakko Munshi is about senior citizens and how a father is left alone, is deserted by the young children when they go out of Odisha to take English education and all that. So, varieties of subjects. He talks about girl children, about marital issues, about senior citizens, about social, complications in the society. So many things. And Chomana Atagunta is basically about the society where the zamindars, they take money from the people from the lower strata of the society, and then how they give them a loan, and then these people are not able to return the loan, and throughout their life they would be paying the interest amount, and at the end of their lives, how there is a death. They have to kill the zamindar. So these kind of stories are there. One story cannot be compared with another. On that basis only, Mayadhar Mansingh compares Fakir Mohan Senapati also to Shakespeare. So I really don't want to go into that detail, because that's another completely different subject. Let's not get into that. So the research points today for this particular paper, where we talk about Revati and Hermeneutics of Translation, my discussions will be on the colonial discourses and the indigenous identity. How Fakir Mohan Senapati takes the colonial discourses in his writings. Bashum, he talks about the freedom struggle to Revati, and Revati, a little girl, he opens her mind about the freedom struggle. So the colonial discourse and the indigenous identity. He reads out the stories from folklore, from mythology to Revati. So there is this indigenous identity and the feminist readings. Fakir Mohan Senapati is one of the best feminists that I have ever read in Indian literature. Apart from Chandra Chattopadhyay or Rabindranath Tagore, Fakir Mohan Senapati is one of the best feminists, one of the important feminists or even you can say eco-feminists who has contributed so much to the post-colonial literatures. So in my lecture I will also be talking about the post-colonial perspectives in the writings of Fakir Mohan Senapati here and there, and of course the eco-critical interpretation. Every now and then he goes back to nature. When he is talking about humanity, about science and technology, about literature and culture, suddenly he will go back to the discussions regarding the ecology and the environment. He tells Revati how important it is to be a part of a bigger universe rather than being a part of only your home and earth. And as a contrast to that, grandmother calls Revati, when she is very angry, she calls her Lo Revati, Lo Revi, Lo Nia, Lo Chuli. Oh Revati, you are as good as fire and you are as good as the earth, Chula. So that means she wants to scold her, she wants to tell her that you are the evil in the house, in the household, because of your education all these things happened. Everyone died. So during that period, in the pre-colonial India, there is no such treatment. Science and technology and medicine was not so very developed, and when there was an epidemic, there were deaths. It was mandatory, there were deaths. And then the grandmother, he puts the entire blame on Revati, that because you wanted to take education, you were Chula and you were Dania in the family. Because of you, everyone died. And even ultimately Vasu also died because you wanted to take education. So, and then the narrative strategies and the literary forms that Fakir Mohan Senapati uses. Fakir Mohan Senapati was not just a good writer, a story writer and a novelist, he also wrote poetry, and then he wrote interesting and important literary essays on the narrative strategies and the literary forms of Odia literature. There is one novel by J.P. Das, Desho Kalo Patra, which has been translated to English as A Time Elsewhere. I think that is a must read as a part of the pre-colonial and the post-colonial discourse for any researcher. If you are working on post-colonial literature, it's a must read for you because it will give you an impression about the pre and the post-colonial scenario in East India, not just Odisha, Bengal, Bihar, even a little bit of Northeast India, Assam and all. So in Deshakalo Patra, Fakir Mohan, he is quoting Fakir Mohan Senapati and his essays, how the narrative strategies and the literary forms of Eastern India was so important in the making of Indian literature, and then thereby in the making of the world literature. Because the Britishers, they were, if you look at the development of folk literature in India, I think you'll agree with me, when you talk about the development of folk literature in India, there were three periods, out of which the period of the missionaries was very, very important. The missionaries documented Indian literature. They translated, they document, of course, for their own benefit. They wanted to understand a culture in order to divide and rule. Probably that was the strategy. But for that matter, they translated a whole lot of Indian literature. And Fakir Mohan Senapati was also a part of that discourse when he says that translation is very important. Fakir Mohan Senapati never translated to English. He was not too much exposed to English education, but the entire Eastern India was reading Fakir Mohan Senapati. His essays and his stories were a part of the Gurukuls during that point of time. And then we will also be talking about reception studies and popular culture. How Fakir Mohan Senapati's translations have been a part of the popular culture today. Not just the story Revati, but there are many other stories when the hint of the popular culture is there. Like somebody who gets educated, he goes abroad, he goes to Europe, and then he leaves his parents alone at home, and how he feels when he comes back to Odisha. He doesn't feel at home in Odisha. He craves for that culture, that Western culture where he thinks everything is just so perfect. And in Odisha, everything is not so imperfect. He doesn't want to talk to the natives anymore. Odia people are natives. And they don't have education, they don't know how to talk, and they don't know how to have a dialogue, and they are not into popular cultures. So today we talk so much about popular culture in the age of digital humanities and post-truth, or even post-folklore. We are talking so much about that so many posts are there, but during that period, that idea of the post was already there. If you think, what is post? Yes, Shiva? You agree with me? Okay, so the idea of post is so much there in today's literature literature, but if you look at Fakir Mohan Senapati's literature, the idea of post was very much there. Now what is post? Yesterday Bhaskar was asking, Ma'am, what is post? My scholars have a lot of questions for me. So they keep on asking me questions so that I can never be lazy. So, what is post? What is post? He said, if I compare you to Kamala Das, then what did you say? And then I said, no, to Sylvia Plath. He told. So I said, don't compare me to Sylvia Plath. She is a modernist and I am a post-modernist. And then the questions were, why are you a post-modernist and why is she a modernist? Then I talked about the idea of melancholy. How her kind of melancholy is giving bread and milk to her children and putting her head into the gas stove and killing herself. That is her kind of modernism. A woman who can decide about herself. And my kind of post-modernism is to handle the pain. If I have some kind of pain, I will deal with it. I will deal with the pain. Of course, I will write about it. I will cry about it. Everyone should cry. No one should stop crying. If you have tears, just take care of it. It should come out. So my kind of post-modernism is cry with your pain, write about your pain, handle the pain, because there is a silver lining everywhere. So you have to find the silver lining, because that is the post-modernism. Look at Fakir Mohan Senapati. He was so much of a post-modernist. He talked about revati. This story, one of my students, I was teaching in Shantiniketan, one of my students said, this is such a grim and a morose and sad story. Well, yes it is. He talks about a character, Revati, who wants to get education, and her father and her mother, they support her. She gets education within a period of 3 years. She is well versed with reading, not just Odia, but Sanskrit and many other languages. And then when she is on the verge of kind of completion of her education and going towards fulfillment, suddenly the plot has a twist. There is this epidemic, and then the parents die one after another. And before dying, the father puts Revati and the family under the responsibility of Vasu, the young, handsome, good-looking teacher. He says that you take care of Revati now. Now again, there is a politics of translation here. I will tell you about the Odia and English after maybe 5 minutes. He stammers. He says, Vasu, Revi, Tumoku, Lagila. The Vasu take care of Revi. Revi is Revati. And the English translation says that Vasu, now you take care of the family. He doesn't talk about the family. He talks about Revati. He wants Revi to be a part of the life of Vasu. So he wants them to marry, probably. He wants him to get married to Revati. But the translators and all the translators, there are so many translations here. I could read quite a few. In none of the translations it says he wanted Revati to get married to Vasu, but they say that Vasu, please take care of my family after I am gone. So anyway, I'll just come to all these things slowly, one by one. So the post-modernism of Fakir Mohan Senapati that I was talking about, Fakir Mohan Senapati, he doesn't stop there. He makes it an open-ended story. Now, you are the one to draw a conclusion out of the story. If you think it is a negative, gloomy, sad story, or if you think that there is a silver lining, when Fakir Mohan Senapati had the audacity to talk about women's education during a period when there were no girls' schools, there were no women's colleges, there were no schools, and a girl could not have been, she could not be sent to any school or an educational institution, even if the Britishers had tried, the missionaries had tried. That is how they had introduced girls' schools. But in one of the essays, Fakir Mohan Senapati says, one morning, somebody is taking the goats out. Then he says, it's a rainy day, where shall I take my goats? He says, take them to the girls' school building. So the girls' school building was good for taking the goats and putting them there. There is a shadow, so there is a shade, and the goats will be safe in the girls' school. So there was no women's education. Girls could not go to school. Whereas the counterpart of Odisha, at that time, Bengal was much more developed. In Bengali literature, you read Tagore, you read Shabichandra Chattopadhyay, you read Dupresh Nandini kind of texts, or even you can read all the texts of Tagore. Women's education is mentioned invariably. Vipradas, Devdas. Everywhere, women characters they are reading. You will get women characters dressed up, wearing full-sleeved blouses, and dressed up in a very beautiful classic way. They would be with a book. Even the paintings of Bengal at that time, women would be lying on the couch with a book. Yeah, and if you look at Odia literature of that period, you will never find any paintings of women itself. Even the popular culture, paintings, you would never find a woman. Women were, maybe an absent gender. You will never find them in any kind of discourse and discussion. That is when Fakir Mohan Senapati wrote Revati. When nobody was thinking about women, women were invariably absent in literatures. Fakir Mohan Senapati wrote about a woman-centric story, Revati. Not just Revati, in almost all the stories. Like I was telling you, one story when a newly-wed woman, she lusts after a beautiful set of bangles, and then the bangle seller comes back to the village after 6 months by making a set of beautiful, Asman Tara chudiya for her. He comes to the village and then he sees that she has become a widow, and her husband, he had been to the war, and she has become a war widow. So the issues of being a war widow, there was no subject which Fakir Mohan Senapati did not touch upon. But unfortunately, he was not translated in the pre-British period. So today, many translators are taking up the task of translation and translating Fakir Mohan Senapati, and we are revisiting the period. And then when it is my kind of a researcher, I would definitely look at the silver lining. I will not look at the dark clouds only. So in this story, there are not just dark clouds. When Fakir Mohan Senapati gives a character, Revati, wanted to take education, but parents are dead. Then Vasu also is dead because Vasu got involved with the treatment of the villagers during the epidemic. And then Revati is blamed by the grandmother that because of you, Vasu also died. Then Revati dies of heartbreak. She is so broken after the death of her parents and after the death of her teacher, who was also her fiancé, her lover, whatever you can decipher. Revati dies of heartbreak. Immediately after the death of Revati, even the grandmother dies. It's the death of an entire family. So Fakir Mohan Senapati concludes by saying, Aurobindo Mohanty Horror Odyssey Prani ko ଆଉ କେହି ଦେଖି ନାହାନ୍ତି. Means after that day, nobody had the chance of seeing any member of the family of Aurobindo family. Aurobindo is the father of Revati. पड़ोसी माने राति शेष शब्द सुनिले. So before the death of everybody, the last few words that came out of the house when the grandmother was shouting, Lo Revati, Lo Revi, Lo Nia, Lo Chuli. What a dramatic ending. That she says, Revati, you are the Nia and Chuli of the house. Because of you, everyone died, and also the grandmother died. It's the death of an entire family. But to a researcher like you and me, is it actually a death? Or is it an opening of a promising future for women's education? To talk about women and their schooling, their engagement with academia. I think this is not the death of a family, rather this is the birth of a discourse. So Revati is definitely a birth of a discourse. It opens the window for the researchers like you and me to talk about pre-colonial and post-colonial India, where women's education was never there, or maybe it was there only in Bengal and a couple of, and the northeast India was also very rich that way. English education came there, or maybe go to Goa. Except a few places, women's education was not there. But then he opened a window by the death of the family. To me, this is definitely, this can be taken to reception studies. So under the Hermeneutics of Translation, if you look at reception studies is a theoretical discourse under hermeneutics. Reception, the simplistically, how do you receive something? How do you receive a story? Like, you can receive a story as it's a grim and sad story, and I can receive the story. My reception may be different from yours. My reception can be linguistic, social, even economic. In the stories of Fakir Mohan Senapati, even he talks about empowering women economically, financially, by giving a part of the property of the father to the girls. When no Odia would have even thought about it, it was blasphemy. What Fakir Mohan Senapati thought at that time was blasphemy. He talked about women, their education, their money. How can a woman have her money? A woman is only married to the house. Like Western feminists also have written here and there that many women marry their kitchen. So in Odia literature also there are discussions where women were married to the kitchen. The only place for women was kitchen, thereby a lot of kitchen politics was created by women in many stories of Fakir Mohan Senapati as well. So reception studies, it can take you to the interpretation of a story as a multi-layered discussion, a multi-layered discourse. And then comparative literature, as I already told you, that Premchand and Fakir Mohan Senapati, Shakespeare and Fakir Mohan Senapati, Thomas Hardy and Fakir Mohan Senapati, they have been really compared. Many people have done researches. After this lecture, maybe you can just go to Shodh Ganga and find out PhD thesis or dissertations on Fakir Mohan Senapati. You will find many on Shakespeare and Senapati, and then Premchand and Senapati, and Thomas Hardy and Senapati. So there are many that will actually open your mind to a whole lot of issues and debates that we might have dismissed. Only reducing Revati to the story, a sad story of a girl child who is dead. It's not exactly so. This is not the sad story of a girl child who is dead because her grandmother was unkind to her. This is what simplistic understanding can give you if Revati is not studied as a multi-layered literature. And then if you go to the historical context, under this hermeneutics, I would recommend go to the historical context of any literature thereof. Fakir Mohan Senapati and his period, it needed this kind of a story. And you know what? What makes me respect Fakir Mohan Senapati is, unlike many of his contemporaries who were reading European literature, Tagore was reading a lot of European literature. He had travelled a lot. He had been to Europe and many countries. But Fakir Mohan Senapati never came out of his village. He was in the Pragana. Pragana is the angan of the village. He was in the center of the village, and he was only participating in the daily lives of people. He never attempted for any kind of Sanskritization. He never attempted any kind of palace paradigm. He never looked at the society from the point of view of the palace. He never talked about only the zamindars, only the kings and queens of a particular society. Like Shakespeare is blamed of writing only from the palace paradigm. Like the folklorists have blamed Shakespeare, that he is one connoisseur of palace paradigm, though I will not do that. But many researchers are actually doing it. But if you look at Fakir Mohan Senapati, he was neither into Sanskritization nor into palace paradigm. Neither he thought that I am a post-colonial or a pre-colonial writer. He never thought about these discourses when he wrote. But then, a lot of critical thinkings were incorporated in his stories in the form of writing about the common people. So that is how I would say that his historical context is important to the researchers and the scholars of Fakir Mohan Senapati. There is a Fakir Mohan Senapati University in Odisha. Yeah? And I have been to that university a couple of times, and they usually ask me to design a syllabus for them where the issues, the debates and the discourses that Fakir Mohan Senapati might have hinted at. Not exactly written, but hinted. So that is where I created one course for them on the historical context of contemporary Odisha and the contribution of Fakir Mohan Senapati to that. And then also look at the satire and the social commentary under hermeneutics. Another issue is satire. He is very satirical in many of his stories, like in Chamana Atabuncho. You see so much of satire. You see that the jamindars, they will give you an amount which is your primary loan, and then throughout your life you will be only paying the interest to the jamindar, and so many satirical discussions are there. The characters would be satirizing each other, that today a new baby is born in the household, okay, he will be good enough to pay the interest throughout his life. So the newborn baby would grow up one day, he will become an old man and die by paying the interests of the zamindar, and he would never have his prime amount, the money that maybe was the loan. And then themes and motives and the narrative techniques. I am constantly talking about the narrative techniques and the literary influence and legacy. Under hermeneutics, another discussion can be the literary influences and the legacy. Fakir Mohan Senapati, I doubt if he was actually influenced by any contemporary writer, because he was not really reading other languages and other literatures. He read some Korean literature, no doubt. And then when he translated Mahabharata, he also had a look at Sarala Das's Mahabharata, and the stories are so very different. Sarala Das's Mahabharata and Fakir Mohan Senapati's translation of the Mahabharata are completely different from each other. So there is no intertextuality, there is no polyphony, and forget about plagiarism. You can't even think about it. So Fakir Mohan Senapati was a very original writer. He talked about the original issues in the society. And then when you talk about this particular story, Revati, coming to Revati, My dialogue is about translation as a mode of representing a pan-Indian identity and the glitches of translation of a significance and a cultural text like riveting in linguistic, cultural, semantics and lexical point of view, and then the language functions vis-a-vis the 26 translated texts in this book, and then translation of brevity bringing home the culture. Has the English translation actually brought home the culture? By the word translation studies, students, you should not understand that translation is taking lexicon after lexicon or word by word from one language to another language. It's not so. Translation is to bring home the culture. If I am translating some Odia text to English, I should be in a position to bring home the culture. See, for example, in one of the stories where I said that the bangle seller, he comes back to the village with freshly newly made bangles and he sees that the woman is in a white sari. If I translate that to English, that he was heartbroken to see the bride in a white dress. What am I even saying? In the European culture, the bride in a white dress, it's a wedding dress. Yeah? And in Odia culture or in many Indian cultures, the white dress is the dress of a widow. So in such cases, what do I even do? Do I put a footnote? Do I put an end note? Or do I change the color of the sari from white to something else? I don't know. There is a confusion. And how do the translators handle this? Comes under the hermeneutics of translation. So, in this translation of brevity, there are many places where I felt at odd with the translator. I mean, I could not agree with the translator. And in some places, the translation was so beautiful, but in some places, I could not agree with the translation. Like, here, in the first, how much time I have? I have time?
Yeah, 2 minutes more.
15 minutes? Okay. So, the beginning of the story says, Kotak Jilla, Hariharpur Pragana, एक Mofasal grammar. It's a Mofasal, Mofasal, everyone knows about it. But the translation has been, from Mofasal it has been translated to district headquarter. It's not a district headquarter. A Mofasal is not a district headquarter, isn't it? And then, grammar of Corona. Corona is a caste. Yeah? And then here it says the visitors and the farmers. The translated text talks about, yes?
Yeah, security man.
Yes. And then it says Laga Podia. Laga Podia means number 5. It says Laga Podia is a cow, like forever milking. A cow which gives milk throughout the year. And the translation is adjusting the right receipts and records of this translation. Lagapodia, and Fakir Mohan has given footnotes 5, 6, 7, 8. The entire story is full of superscripts. So many small 1, 2, 3, up to 48, and the translated text has not taken any of them into consideration. So when the text got translated from Odia to English, there were 2 Odia people and 1 American. 3 people translated it together. Maybe they had a debate or a discussion or something like that. And then Revati is singing Krupa Sindhu Vadan. Krupa Sindhu Vadan is, it's one of the cultural texts of Odisha, where a rhyme scheme is maintained. And then the translation of this is Shamabandhu taught Revati singing all mellifluous and beautiful songs. So Krupa Sindhu Vadan is presented as the mellifluous and the beautiful songs of Odisha. The text Krupa Sindhu Vadan has not been translated exactly. And then there is a cultural gap again. There is a poem where Revati is singing a song. Ka age kahibi buhari, tume na chahile natho, garibo jiba sari, karo ba no karo trano, pade samarpichi prano, hruday achi tomo namo dhani, tumo bina शून्य है हरि शीतल कर जीवन प्रेमामृत दान करी. So she is singing a song to Hari. Hari means Lord Vishnu, and the translation is something different. Where shall I take my prayers, O Lord? If you have a blind eye, surely I shall be finished. Be it salvation. To thee this life is a dedication. To thee this soul is laden. Empty, 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 all the 3 walls. But the idea of emptiness is not here. Well, in the English poem, the idea of emptiness, she says, I am empty, empty, empty from within because I cannot connect to Hari. Hari is Lord Vishnu. But the Odia says that I so connect with Hari that my heart is full of joy and happiness. Yeah? So this cultural gap is there. So I'm taking these, but there are also some very beautiful portions. Last night I was reading all the texts till late night. I read so many of them. I've written also excellent translation somewhere or other. I'll read that, sir. And then another is about Vasudev. The character of Vasudev, Namo Vasudeva. Namoti Japuri Vasudev, Lokoti भी Sapuri Vasudev. Like the name, the person, proper name is connotative. He is as beautiful as his name. His name is Vasudev. He is so satisfied in his life. Toka tera bhitara bahara sabu sundar. He is beautiful inside out. Bhitar bahar. Toka ladka. Toka मतलब लड़के का अंदर बाहर सारे सुंदर ही सुंदर. टोका तरा bhitara bahara sabu sundar. गाँव मझिरे चाली जीवा बड़े मुंडे टेकी कहा कुछ चाहे नहीं. Boys का अंदाजा कोड़िए. His age is 20. Age is not mentioned here. Revati is 12. Boy is 20. 8 years gap. A prospective love story. Age is not mentioned in the translated text. And here, गाँव मझिरे चाली में बड़े मुंडे टेकी कहा कुछ चाहे नहीं. निजो पादों को चाहे चालू था. Well, this is such a beautiful thing. I remember when I was a kid, I'm from a family of 6 girls. So my mother had told me when you walk on the road, you should be looking at your feet. Don't look at any boy. Yeah. So we were taught to look at our feet and walk. Today I will not do that. I look at everybody and walk. But then we were taught to do that. And Vasudeva, when he was walking in the village, he never looked at anybody. He looked at his feet. So a good character, a person of moral character and integrity, would look at his feet and walk. This Odia characteristic. I'm not asking you to look at your feet while walking. These two boys are stressed. Mom is asking us to look at our feet while walking. Don't do that. So when Vasudeva is walking, in the English story, it's not mentioned that Vasudeva was looking at his feet when he was walking. The English story says, I will tell you, yes. Well, when Vasudeva walked in the village, he looked like cover to cover. And what is cover to cover, I don't understand. Is it about looking at his feet, or is it about his character was very positive or something from cover to cover? I have to talk about that. There is a linguistic gap. And then Vasudeva comes to teach Revati. In Odia, Fakir Mohan Senapati has written Kitabo. Kitabo is kitab. Kitab in Hindi. In Odia, it's actually bohi. This is not a kitab, this is a bohi in Odia. But Senapati has written Kitabo. Pa, not pa, pa. So the use of the word Kitabo says that Fakir Mohan Senapati had also some exposure to Hindi or other kind of literatures. He might be talking to other writers. So बार-बार वो लिख रहे किताब को पढ़ाएगा. Not like he will teach the book, he will teach the kitab. And it has not been translated here. The word book is missing everywhere. And then Tirilagio in the text, Tirilagio about Revati says that she is a mature girl, somebody who has attained puberty. A girl who has attained puberty is a Tirilagio. But here it's written she is a very smart and good-looking girl. So a girl, Tirilagio, somebody attaining puberty, has been interpreted in a different way. And then Revati, in the beginning of the story, she is very angry with the grandmother. When she says that you should not study, she is very angry with her. And then she calls her Budi Dugurita. Duguri matlab, you stupid old woman. Yeah? Budi Duguri, good girl. That kind of thing she tells her. But here in the translation, it says that very respectfully, she told her grandmother, please let me study. So, in Odia, it's Budi Duguri, means chup kar budiya, ja yahan se. That kind of a thing. Because you know, घर का एक लाडली बच्ची. See, Revati's character is multi-layered here. In the first part of the story, she is presented as a laadli bachchi. Father and mother, both of them are so fond of her. She is fed. She will not eat her food on her own. When she is reading Manabuddha Chautisa, her mother will come and put food in her mouth. You eat. And she is not even willing to stay away, let me study. So Revati is presented as a very pyari, very somebody very pampered kind of a child. And the last part of the story, she is rejected, she is left alone, and then she is Nia and Chuli. Lo Revati, Lo Revi, Lo Nia, Lo Chuli. So she is presented in a different way after the death of the entire family. But the translation of the text in all the languages, they miss out to some extent. I won't say, I'm not a critique exactly. I also appreciate that they have translated so much, which many of us could not do. At least by translating, they brought this to this university or no kind of syllabi. But also that motif of a pampered child who is shouting at the grandmother, "Puri dukuri, jao yahan se," she is not presented that kind of a character. So, under the hermeneutics of translation, I would say that in the Odia text, the Revati is a round character. In the English, she is a flat character. It's a very flat character. She's presented as somebody humble, polite, wants to study. Everybody died. She is heartbroken. She died. In a very simplistic way, a flat character is presented in the translation. Whereas in the Odia text, there is this round character with all her motives. She runs around, goes to the doorstep 100 times a day to see if Basu is coming. But that part is missing here. She doesn't go any time to the front door to check if Basu is coming. She waits for Basu with her books to come and teach her. So she is presented as a character where some of her character traits are somehow missing. And then yes, in page number 48 of the original text and 60 of the original text, when Revati reads Odia literature, he has written, Senapati has written, Tundale Batuli Baje Nahi. Batuli Baje Nahi matlab non-stop, somebody speaks in a non-stop manner. Without a break, she speaks. She will just keep on talking. So, in Hindi you call that Batuni. बहुत बातूनी आदमी है और लड़की है, you say that. So, in Odia text, Revati is presented as a Batuni ladki. But in the English text, it says, when she read when she read Odia literature, she read with a lot of respect. Well, she read with a lot of respect, but definitely, Tundale Batoli Baje Nahi means Batuni ladki padti rahegi and baatein nahi karti rahegi. She would talk without a break. So that kind of character is also missing. And then, yes, somewhere I have written good translation. After the death of everybody, Revati एनिकी सही गृह प्रांगण संचारिणी लीलामय प्रतिमा नुहे ता पार्टी कहीं शुणी ना बापा माँ गला दिन दांड द्वारा ताकू कहीं देखी ना ता पक्षे वर्तमान दिन राति समान सूर्य रे आलो ना राति रे अंधार ना जगत शून्य बापा माँ मरीगले से कथा से विश्वास कर पारनी पेटरे भोक ना आखिरी निद ना. So after the death of the entire family, what all happens to Revati? She lost her sleep. For her, the sun and the moon are all the same. She doesn't distinguish between the night and the day anymore. In her open eyes, she sees darkness. In her daytime, she sees the darkness. So, in a stream of consciousness manner, the translation has come out so beautifully here. Revati's presence no longer fill the house. I find this part really beautiful. I find stream of consciousness here. Revati's presence no longer fill the house. Gone were the days when she would be heard mourning loudly. She stopped crying after the death of everybody. Nobody heard her voice. Nobody saw her out of the doors. Her large, brooding eyes with silent tears looked like blue lilies in water. Her heart and mind broken, day and night were alike. Sun brought her no light, night no darkness. World was a void. The thoughts of her parents overwhelmed her. Their faces hung before her eyes. She could not bring herself to believe that everyone was truly dead. Hunger no longer stirred her stomach. Slumber no longer closed her eyes. So this part is very, very beautifully translated. The character is actually presented the way she should have been after the death of the entire family. Basu completely possessed her eyes, her mind, her heart. So now her mind, heart and eyes, everything is thinking about only Basu death. Then after that, the death scene definitely comes, and the last part of the story, when the grandmother goes to get some rice from the shopkeeper, they don't have any money or anything left at home, so she takes one utensil, which is already a broken utensil. She goes to the shopkeeper and says, give me some rice, there is this girl at home, she will eat. And then he takes the utensil, he examines, he says, who will give you rice out of it? Isse kya chawal dete? I will not give you. Then the old woman will sit in the shop for 2 hours, silently, expectantly looking at the shopkeeper. Then he thinks, okay, let us give her some rice. He gives her a little rice. She comes home. So the grandmother, who was so much angry with the girl for education, in the last part of the story, she cooks for her, cooks some dal chawal for her. Then she goes to ask her to eat. But at that time, Revati is dead, eyes open, and she is dead. And then she says, Lo Revati, lo chuli, lo niya, lo chuli, and then the grandmother also dies. So the tragic grandeur of that death scene is again missing in the English translation. Or maybe because I am too much of an Odia, though I speak and write in English and I am a teacher of English, but my Odia consciousness doesn't accept that the tragic grandeur of Revati's death scene, where Revati is dead, eyes open, and grandma is touching her face and touching her eyes, and then she tries to close her eyes, but then both granddaughter and grandmother, they fall down from the veranda and both of them die. The tragic grandeur is not presented so well, it could not touch my heart. Like reading the Odia story the way I cried, I actually saw. I could not cry reading the story, reading the English portion. She says, she ran her hand over the length of the girl's body and then held a finger close to her nostrils. The night's silence was rent by her eerie silence. 2 bodies fell down from the veranda with a thud to the ground. That was the end of Shamabandhu's family. The last words which emanated from the house ever was Revati, Revi, fire, ashes. But that is Lo Revati, Lo Revi, Lo Niya, Lo Chuli. So where is that Lo? That Lo, it's so loaded that no translation can take that loaded Lo from one language to another. I will not say that translation is bad. The translations are definitely good, but probably when we translate this kind of a cultural text from one language to another, there is a big responsibility with us. I mean, I should be responsible enough to read the entire culture, the nuances of a culture, look at the source text, look at the interpretations, the cultural mediations. I should look at the creative reconstructions, the reader response, theories, and a must for the translator. Look at the reader response, look at the linguistic differences, ambiguity, the contextual constraints, look at the style, technical and terminological challenges, the time constraints. Revati's time and today's time are one and the same. That is the historical context. I won't say that the story is outdated. I would say this is a very contemporary story. Revati was struggling with the education of a girl child. Today we are struggling with something else. Women definitely are going through some other issues. Maybe all the women sitting here would agree that the issues are not so simple. If you look at the debates of third wave feminism and third world feminism, they are not one and the same. Look at the third world feminism. Look at the stories of the third world feminism. Sujata Bhatt's poetry collection, I will conclude in a minute. Sujata Bhatt's poetry collection, Garlic Poems, if you look at that. The Garlic Poems, they talk about the nuances of a woman and her body. She takes some folk tales. You know, in some communities, even today, if a woman gets married, the woman may be a professor or a doctor or whatsoever, she gets married and within a few years, if she doesn't have a child, questions are very many, right? People will start questioning her, that she got married and she doesn't have children, or even today, if some woman gets married and then there is an issue, and then people will question her, people will point fingers at her, which is so very unfortunate. And then look at Sujata Bhatt's Garlic Poetry Collection, where she takes the garlic stories of some community, some tribal communities, where on the night of the marriage, before the consummation of the marriage of the woman with the man, they will cut small pieces of a garlic, raw garlic, and it is inserted inside the vagina of the woman, and then she is made to sleep alone in the room, not with the man but made she should sleep alone, and in the next morning, if her mouth smells of garlic, then she is a fertile woman, then the consummation may take place. Then she will be sent to consummate her marriage with her husband, otherwise the marriage might as well break. So Sujata Bhatt takes such kind of metaphors from folklore and from tribal studies, and then she uses those stories as a part of her discourses and poetry, like I always do. When I wrote Sita, I read 300 Ramayans. I took so many folk Ramayans to consideration. Out of the 300 Ramayans, only 2 probably were the so-called mainstream. Valmiki and maybe Ramcharitmanas, I read those. But then I read 298 folk Ramayans. And they are so different. They present Sita's character so differently. Similarly, in the garlic holes, you may think, what garlic? Are we talking about garlic today? Which woman gets into garlic paste? Garlic is a metaphor. Women are always under some kind of scanner. In a marriage, in a relationship, in the university, in the kitchen, in the household, everywhere women are under scanner, even today, even then. So Fakir Mohan Senapati wrote a story of Revati, the girl child, who represents you, me, a story of pain and suffering and sorrow, of course with a silver lining, and the story continues. Revati is a window, an opening towards women's education and solidarity and sisterhood and emancipation.